Welcome to the online risk management training course for the Atlanta Alumnae chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. This training was made by the Atlanta Alumnae chapter for the sole use of the chapter for training. This online training presentation is designed to inform the members of the Atlanta Alumnae chapter who will be participating in programs involving youth on how to manage risk associated with these programs. During this training, we will focus on learning about risk management through understanding the policies, procedures, and guidelines of risk management, identifying risk management activities, and applying best practices and implementing risk management practices. Why do we conduct risk management training? The purpose of risk management training is to ensure that all participating chapters administer all youth initiatives consistently and in a manner that is to the interest of the participating youth and to Delta. For example, minimize any harm or injury to the youth, as well as the probability of Delta incurring any liability. Risk management is a component of compliance. Chapters can be asked to stop all operations if not in compliance. One-time guest speakers do not have to comply with the risk management procedures. Foundational principles. It is a violation for any member to engage in any activity that simulates membership intake or initiation rights. No member shall require or allow any youth to engage in any of the following: stepping, dressing uniformly, wearing Delta paraphernalia, referring to volunteers as Big Sister, adopting or using a special call or sound, assigning a special name or number, running errands or performing tasks for volunteers, or meeting in secret locations. T-shirts. T-shirts are permitted. They must be worn only at Delta-sponsored events. Delta symbols cannot be used on participants' T-shirts. Risk management procedures. All volunteers must be screened and trained. Screening is biennial, every 2 years. Screening includes the completion of a written application, a face-to-face training, online research, including Google, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, Instagram, just to name a few, and a check of references. If there is a red flag raising concern for safety, a criminal background check is also required. If the applicant passes the screening, they can complete training. Training is annual. Training occurs after the acceptance as a volunteer. Volunteers must receive an acceptance letter. At training, volunteers must acknowledge Delta's policy against youth abuse and sign a code of ethics policy and agree to promptly report any suspected abuse to authorities. Training records must be securely maintained as a part of the chapter's official files. Evidence of training must be maintained by the chapter. The volunteer application and information must be treated strictly confidential. Automatic disqualification from youth initiatives. A volunteer will be disqualified if the volunteer fails to complete the screening process, has a past history of substance abuse or abuse of youth, has been convicted of any crime involving youth, has a history of violence or sexually exploitative behavior, or was terminated from any position caused by misconduct with youth. Isolated contact prohibited. Maltreatment is less likely to occur when the interactions between adults and youth are visible to others. Therefore, there shall be no one-to-one isolated contacts involving adult volunteers in any tutoring, training classes, or group activities. Abuse reporting mandatory. All abuse must be reported immediately. A termination of the relationship between the youth and alleged volunteer perpetrator must occur immediately. Remain aware of signs of child abuse. Child abuse consists of any act of commission or omission that endangers or impairs a child's physical or emotional health and development. The major forms of child abuse are physical and emotional abuse and sexual abuse. Watch for signs such as physical abuse signs, such as bruises or welts, burns or unexplained fractures, and other types of unexplained abrasions or lacerations. Physical neglect signs such as a child is always hungry, consistent lack of cleanliness, clothes not suitable, and behavior that does not appear normal. Emotional abuse signs such as behavior which indicates depression and antisocial behavior, loss of appetite, and refusal to eat. Sexual abuse signs such as child expresses or implies sexual activity involvement, reports pain, itching, bruises, or bleeding of genitalia, signs of pregnancy, demonstration of withdrawn behavior, exaggerated knowledge, or interest in adult sexual behavior. Involve youth parents. Keep parents and guardians informed of all youth initiatives. Send schedules of events to inform parents of all planned activities. Include a parent's guide as a part of the chapter's published materials about the youth initiative. Ask parents and guardians to talk with their youth about youth abuse. Encourage parental participation, visitation, and observation during the program activities. More importantly, obtain a signed general release releasing Delta from unintentional injury to the child. Obey strict guidelines on photographing youth. Never photograph youth in any stage of undressing, such as being nude, partially nude, in underwear, or wearing pajamas, to name a few examples. Chapters must obtain authorization from parents to photograph youth and to use the photographs for chapter-related activities. Parental authorization must acknowledge that Delta will own all rights to photographs and release Delta from all liability. Discipline of youth cannot be abusive. Before imposing discipline, chapters must implement the following procedures. Communicate to parents that certain actions will result in disciplinary actions, that discipline under no circumstances will involve physical punishment, that participation in any Delta Youth Initiative requires the youth and parent or guardian to agree to follow established policy, which includes consent to be disciplined. Chapters must obtain the parents' consent for their youth to be disciplined. When imposing discipline, allow the youth the opportunity to tell their side of the story. Stay solution focused and involve youth participants in the solution process. Volunteers should never use offensive language when addressing youth. When a volunteer feels themselves getting upset, they should step back from the situation. Avoid embarrassing the youth in front of their peers and other volunteers. Rewards and punishments must be appropriate and designed to encourage positive behavior. Always discipline in a manner to rehabilitate and guide youth towards positive growth. Structure discussions and activities so that the youth feels empowered to freely express themselves without the fear of being judged harshly or unfairly. Always use good judgment and common sense. Out of program contact prohibited. Prohibited activities include sleepovers, pajama parties, overnight retreats, overnight book talks or workshops, or any overnight cultural experience. There shall be no out of program contact between volunteers and youth without the express written permission or participation of the parent or guardian. College tours. Approval of the Regional Director and National Program Planning and Development Committee is required for college tours. An action plan must be submitted. Criminal background clearance for chaperones and commercial transportation with liability coverage is mandatory. Respect privacy rights. Youth have a right to privacy. Youth should not be observed changing clothes, showering, or using toilet facilities unless security dictates that an adult be present. Adults should protect their own privacy and should never undress, shower, or use the toilet when they may be seen by the youth. Refraining from inappropriate touching is an important component of respecting a youth's right to privacy. If a youth seems uncomfortable with hugging or other touching, there should be no touching. Touching includes hugging, and hugging shall not be prolonged. Touching shall occur only in public in the presence of others, never in secret or isolation. If touching is required, touching only with the youth's permission is allowed. Mandatory sign in, sign out procedures. Always use sign in, sign out sheets for youth initiatives. Sign in procedures must require a parent or guardian of youth participants to identify individuals who are authorized to pick up their youth from the program. Use of personal cars. Volunteers cannot transport youth in their cars. When chapters use required commercial transportation to transport youth participants, chapters must obtain written permission of each participant to be transported to and from the event. Chapters must contract with reputable companies with comprehensive general liability insurance. Chapters must require the company to add Delta as an additional insured on the company's liability policy. Control Internet access. Chapters are responsible for protecting youth from the dangers of allowing access to inappropriate Internet exposure, including harassment, stalking, or physical injury. Chapters must develop and distribute to youth an acceptable Internet use policy, consider installing blocking or filtering software on computers used by youth, provide an Internet orientation or training session, monitor and routinely observe youth online activity and check visited sites. Inform youth that they have no privacy rights while using Delta's equipment to access the Internet. Health-related risk awareness mandatory. Chapters must establish procedures to follow regarding when to send an ill youth home, what to do if the parent or guardian is not available, what medicines a volunteer could dispense, and accommodations for allergic or asthmatic youth. Chapters must also obtain parental permission to seek necessary medical care in an emergency. The chapter must require parents to complete and sign forms granting permission to administer medications if a youth participant is expected to need medication during participation in Delta activities. Weather-related risk awareness mandatory. When sponsoring outdoor activities, keep an eye on weather conditions and respond accordingly, and limit activities when the weather is extreme, hot or cold. In conclusion, Delta's primary concern is for the safety and well-being of all youth participants. This objective is best achieved when members adhere strictly to the policies, procedures, and guidelines explained herein. This completes our training for the Delta Risk Management Training presented by the Atlanta Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. You may now proceed to the written test. For more information, contact the AAC Risk Management Team. Email them at riskmanagement@atlantaalumnidst.org.